How's it going, everyone? My name is Falling Hurts, and today I want to talk about one of the most hotly anticipated survival games of recent days. And no, I'm actually not talking about Power World. That game kind of blew up, even though some people wanted it. I think that one kind of got the Geist, if it will. No, today we're talking about a game that I don't really like the name of, but I really like, and that's Enshrouded. And this is coming from Keen Games, and it came out just a couple days ago on January 24th, 2024. And as of right now, it's got just under 7,000 reviews at 83% very positive. And what I wanted to offer today with this video is kind of a quick sum-uppance of my general thoughts as a first impression. I will be doing a full review for this game, but I want to kind of talk about what the early hours are like and if it's something that feels necessary. So quick asides, and what should make the difference here is I've played roughly around 5.5 hours, and I've only generally completed the first biome or zone, the starter zone of the game. Now, with that being said, I've taken quite a bit of time to explore and learn the game's mechanics, at least as much as they're presented to me so far. So, when you boot up the game, you'll either choose to play a co-op server, where you can play with up to 16 people, which I haven't done, or you can play solo in an offline world, which is what I'm doing right now and what my gameplay will be here. But you are a Flameborn, an altered individual awakened from hibernation to save humanity. Actually, that's just Halo 1. But truly, your goal is quite clear: to erase the deadly mist called the Shroud and create the last bastion of humanity. And as you're thrust into the world, you're met with such a weird blend of games and genres that it's hard to not be compelled, at least to some degree. So you start this whole process by communing with the Great Flame in order to make your base. This is kind of your main quest line at first, and it really acts as a tutorial for the world in those opening hours. But at a base level, this is a survival crafting game, but I was genuinely surprised with how accessible these aspects were. The crafting took a bit of time to adjust to, more specifically the base building, but after an hour or so I found it to be so compelling due to easy resource gathering and nice quality of life features. Not to mention the ability to craft your own buildings, and they look like they're already a part of the world and baked in. That's how well the base building actually visually looks. I think of Ark Survival Evolved, where all of your shit just looks so out of place within the world. And that sense of place within the world as you build things really gave me the incentive to want to make it look nice. Give it decorations, give it chairs, set things in proper place. As much as it is function, it's also form as well. Now, there's also the usual objects like workbenches and smelters, but one thing that I thought was unique were the NPC specialists that you can find and recruit to your base. Much like you, they've been hibernating as well, but you need to go and rescue them. The first one I found is the blacksmith. Currently, this is the only one I've gotten to without leaving the biome, and he crafts better gear than I can, and he can also upgrade the stuff that I have to unlock more perks on our weapons. I also like the way that the rarity of loot works in this game. So when you find an item, like say a legendary axe, and you also have a common axe as well, so green versus legendary, generally they do the same amount of damage, but the difference that you'll get is you can upgrade that legendary weapon even further and unlock more things, like extra damage, effects like bleed or stuff like that. Whereas the common weapon will top out with maybe slightly more damage, and that's all you can do. But circling back around to that Great Flame, the altar, where you build your base, as you make advancements in finding new resources or an NPC, the game pushes you to try new things, such as traversal or cooking, or any number of different ways to interact. In that way, the game in its early hours doesn't feel grindy, where you're punching trees all the time to get resources, unless you really want to make a crazy base, of course. But rather, it feels really, really well paced. As I said, the Flame is giving you quests that act as a tutorial, so you want to do them to learn more, but in doing so, you get quest rewards, whether it be experience or whatnot. You're actually always progressing further, and it feels satisfying. And venturing further and further out in and of itself is rewarding, as you find new creatures, lore details, and quite frankly, better loot. But back to that survival for a second, the usual aspects of hunger and thirst are all but gone. Well, at least in the way that you may know them. Honestly, the survival mechanics remind me a lot of Valheim. Eating provides you with more potential health, meaning that if you start with 100 health and you're about to go out and explore, you might want to eat a piece of meat, which may increase your maximum health to 130 until the effects of that meat wear off. Drinking is similar, except that this impacts stamina instead, so it's always nice to have some water jugs on hand. But as you build your base, your task calls you further and further away. From rats to wolves to these corrupted guys to raiders and even skeletons, there's a few enemy types so far, and the humanoid enemies are by far my favorite, as they seem to have the most variety when you're fighting them. At the very least, sometimes with the weapons that they may be holding. But to be honest, I was beginning to worry about enemy variety, but as I continued to the game's first major point of view in the Spire, I realized that there were more biomes on the horizon, surely to include new foes, and sure enough that held true almost immediately. As I kind of edged out along the sides of those biomes, you started to see new creatures, and already I felt more and more challenged, whereas earlier on I felt the game was a little easy. Now where the game does show its depth is how you can interact with the world. The game is super destructible, with different explosives meant to blow pathways open, and terraforming mining tools where you can reshape the landscape however you see fit. Throw onto that a fairly satisfying traversal system where platforming makes use of gliding, grappling, and sometimes even climbing, not free flow entirely, while leveraging stamina circle meters. It's hard not to feel Breath of the Wild's influence in this game. And with that being said, I think one aspect of the game that I'm not too comfortable with saying is that I've seen a lot of comparisons, not from the developers per se, where people kind of simplify this game as a survival open world Souls-like game. And I just don't see it. I mean, I guess, but in my opinion, I knew this wasn't a Souls game when I could play the game with mouse and keyboard competently. Stamina-based combat where you can lock on, dodge, and block while using a variety of weapons is, once again, Breath of the Wild. I actually have no issues with this. This game takes a lot of cues from Breath of the Wild and leaves some of them behind. I would argue that most of the puzzles in like the predetermined locations, like the villages you can find, are mostly traversal oriented. I did come along one where I had to find where a chest was buried in a farmland because I found a note that stated they would be there. And of course you look around and you find it sticking up out of the ground slightly. But all in all, I enjoy the gameplay loop that I've experienced so far. You're left to your own devices to find new ways to traverse the world and interact with the world, get new resources, and even what to craft. However, the game keeps you on a really tight rail if that's what you want, and as a single player, this is what I like to do, by following the quests themselves. Even the side quests that you find within the world, all by way of notes that you can find, which it makes it really convenient for both a lore perspective and the gameplay of finding these locations. By it marks everything in somewhat of a circle little area on your map, so you can always find what these clues are talking about. But then also, the game really does a good job of organizing all of these notes and their subject matters in the menu, which I think is superb. My biggest gripe about the game is something that I feel it's going to alleviate a bit over time. I'm not a big fan of the combat. As it stands right now, the gameplay is very clunky. I mean, I haven't even found a way to properly change lock-on characters, as you could in a Souls game, for instance, where if you're locked onto a target, you can't easily switch from one to the next, which is unfortunate. I think a part of that is because the inventory system and like the hotbar is so easy to switch and adjust that you have a lot of freedom there. However, that comes at the cost of those normal button layouts going to that rather than switching targets. So in the heat of the moment, that can be a bit frustrating. But what's really clunky about the combat is just the way it feels. Everything feels slow, the fast weapons don't feel weighty enough, and the heavy weapons feel really weighty and don't feel like they do enough damage to justify it. But again, the saving grace of this is that there is a whole skill tree in this game that as you unlock these points, whether it be by leveling up or a quest reward, you can kind of create a really unique blend of classes. It breaks it all down. Like, you've got all your subclasses, like your barbarian, warrior, athlete, healer, all of these different aspects that make the game sound insane. However, earlier on, I don't really have full access to that information. So as I play, I'm going to kind of gauge how the game actually feels. I just wanted to note that earlier on, the combat is probably my least favorite aspect of the game. You've got the dodge rolling and everything like that, and it feels okay. It's just that I feel like I'm putting extra brain power towards something that would be second nature in a Souls-like, and I don't think controller would change that. And I really can't emphasize enough just how much I believe that these skills that I unlock will truly make the difference here. For instance, I'm putting stuff more towards a warrior build, so I've gained strength points and maybe constitution for a little bit of extra health, but one ability I've gotten so far is the ability to do a jump attack. So based on what weapon I have is how deadly this is going to be, but the idea, I jump in the air and I kind of slam down on enemies and do some extra damage, which is super satisfying. On from that, I can acquire a double jump, which is going to be way different for traversal, and that's going to change the game up for me immensely and how quickly you can get around. But then of course from there on, there's minuscule differences like changing damage rates, defense rates, the ability to heal, all of these different things. It's going to make a big difference in the later aspects of the game. I'm just not there yet. But for a first impression, about 5.5 hours, I think there's huge potential. I just can't commit to that idea just yet. So that's why I want to say, come back in a little while for a full review of the game, as well as I will be covering updates to the game as they come out. And ultimately, as I round out this video, that's all I want to say. This game has huge potential. While I can't speak definitively on pretty much any aspect of this game right now, this is my first impressions video. I want to make it known that from the different biomes that you can see on the vistas, on the horizons, to the beautiful world that you can explore, which is backed up by fairly competent visuals. I had a few issues where textures weren't streaming in quite as quickly as I would have liked, but a strong art style and color palette really seals the deal as you see those morning sunrises or those evening sunsets to that deep darkness slowly rolling out across the world, and you can see it at certain points. It's just impressive. The lighting in this game is really, really good. Pair that with a soundtrack that is so melancholic most of the time that I can't help but feel both hopeful and sad for this world that has been completely demolished by the Shroud. And it's aspects like that build up this world as a truly dangerous and downtrodden place that makes me a little more sad that the fog isn't a little more deadly. I mean, so far the enemies within it aren't that unreasonable, and they never spawn in such a way that it's a challenge to get away from them. But once again, I'll be looking out for more, or maybe even some more claustrophobic environments where it actually is a struggle to get through there in a reasonable amount of time, as your amount of time within the fog before you die is limited. But regardless, that's it for me. I'm not comfortable putting a rating on the game just yet, but for a normal price of $30 for an early access title, and I've had pretty much no bugs up till this point, and no graphical issues, no performance problems. So from a solid standpoint, I would say that this game is something that may be worth looking into. Maybe watch a little more raw gameplay rather than what I'm putting together here, if that's really what you're wanting to hop into. Otherwise, I can't say for sure. And I hate that that's how I have to end this video, but until I know every aspect of the game that there is right now, I can't say for sure. So, that being said, thank you for watching this video. Consider subscribing, and if you really want to go that extra mile, if you're ever on the Epic Games Store, consider using my creator code Falling Hertz. Thank you so much for watching this video, and goodbye.